Thank you. And joining us now on the phone is Mohammed Shafiq. He is the chief executive of the Ramadhan Foundation. And thank you so much, sir, for joining us here on the program. Condolences to the Muslim community in New Zealand and also around the world who are stirred and shaken by this attack. What's your reaction to these shootings that took place at mosques in Christchurch today?
Well, obviously, as you rightly said, all decent people around the world will utterly condemn what we've seen in Christchurch and send our prayers and condolences. This wasn't just an attack against Muslims and the mosque. This was an attack against all places of worship and all decent people around the world, and it requires all of us to stand together, united against hatred and division. And for too long, the casual acceptance of Islamophobia, the casual hatred towards the Muslim community that has been embedded within societies across the world, have been tolerated for too long. And this terrorist attack is a consequence of that deeply rhetoric that we see around the world from our politicians, media, and commentators.
You say that this was an attack against faith. This was an attack against Islam. Moments ago, I spoke to a terror analyst, Sajjan Gohul, who said that this attack had an intention. It was a terrorist attack that wants to cause a race war, that it wants to incite violence. Do you fear that?
There are extremists on both sides. So on the ISIS, Al-Qaeda and others, that want a similar war between Muslims and the rest of the world. And there are far-right extremists who want a race war. And as I said, the vast majority of decent people around the world watching your... and people who believe in tolerance and coexistence. And they're working, we are working very hard to tackle this from within the Muslim community, but it requires now concerted effort. If I may say so, the rhetoric that we see from the White House and President Trump over these past few years have allowed a narrative to be settled within people's minds that somehow Muslims are alien to Western societies. We've dehumanized Islam and Muslims to a point where this sort of terrorist atrocity becomes a norm. And I think that's the deeply worrying thing.
And not just the grisly act itself, the mowing down of dozens and dozens of people in places of worship, but also the fact that it was filmed and it was live streamed and it was shared on social media. Does that alarm you even more?
Yes, I find that deeply traumatic and shocking. I live thousands of miles away in the United Kingdom, and I must have got that some aspects of the video sent via social media. It's despicable, and I'm really glad that social media companies are taking immediate action to remove that from their platforms. But it's just not good enough. I think the casual way in which we've accepted hatred towards communities has got to be taken on, and I think those social media giant companies have got a huge responsibility to take off that hate, whether it's towards Muslims, but whether it's towards Jewish community or the LGBT community or any community. These media giants have got to take action, and I hope that we can use this awful moment in the history of the world to bring communities together.
Facebook did react to it. It said that it took the video off its platform, but the truth about the internet is it's like an oil spill. Once it's out there, it's out there. And do you fear that the video could scar the minds of people, not just in New Zealand, but around the world, and could even create copycat incidents, heaven forbid?
Yes, I think the main suspect who's been arrested has claimed in a manifesto that he was inspired by Andres Breivik. We will see this. It was a coordinated, well-planned attack, and the threat from far-right extremism exists across the country, the United Kingdom, but around the world as well. And that's why it's so important, for here in Europe, where the casual demonization of minority communities, of refugees, of immigrants, the rise of the far right in governments across Europe, and the rise of Trump in the United States has led to a moment where we, as human beings, have to look at, how can we bring people together? How can we stop this wanton abuse towards any particular community?
So, what can one do? I mean, when the ideology of hatred, whether it's the ideology of the far right or the ideology of ISIS, is so seductive and viral and can play a factor in mass murders like what happened today in Christchurch, what could be done to contain it?
I think we all just need to take a step back and look at our language. And I urge, I keep coming back to this point, President Trump, other political leaders in the United Kingdom, far-right leaders across Europe, to just reflect on your language. And when you dehumanize a whole community, or you hold Muslims responsible for the actions of the, of terrorists or sexual predators, or you hold the Jewish community responsible for what the Israeli government's doing. I mean, this sort of stereotyping and deeply offensive language towards any particular community has to be called out. And I hope that we can use this as an opportunity to bring communities together.
Absolutely. End the stereotyping, end the dehumanization to bring communities together. Mohammed Shafiq, the Chief Executive of the Ramadan Foundation, thank you for joining me, and take care.